Yeah, back at it, guys.
What's going on, y'all, man?
What's going on?
So, I wanted to circle back to this topic. Last year, the conversation was really big from Kanye West and Kyrie Irving regarding um, Jewish people in, being a large um, contributor to slavery. But I keep reading stuff, and I'm seeing stuff that's not necessarily true. I've been reading that the Jewish community were a small portion of enslavers. Um, and I've been looking around different articles. I'm going to pull up an article that's actually, it might be seem biased to some, but I keep seeing this information being the same on other websites. But this is actually from a Jewish website, so I want to hear it from the Jewish community. And it's called and it's just, they're debunking the whole thing about them being enslavers. But also, like I said, that can be on a level of bias because it's coming from them. But I've read on several sources and it was like the same kind of stuff. So I was like, might as well go directly to them then.
Right. Okay.
So the site, let me pull that back up. So this is from myjewishlearning.com. And it's Jews and the African American slave trade, the African slave trade. And it says here off top, it says where the false claim that Jews controlled the slave trade comes from. Like many others, Jews participated in the transatlantic slave trade, but they by no means dominated it. And I think that was the biggest issue because they were trying to blame everything, saying this community right here has been the reason why everything is like this. But that's not true. And
Okay.
if
So let's
also,
just
I was
dive
going to,
in.
huh?
Okay. Go ahead. I'm gonna say let's just go ahead and dive into the
Okay,
article.
okay, go ahead. I want you to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all don't be looking at my ads over. I'm gonna close them out. I've been looking at a little scooter.
All right. The role some Jews played in the Atlantic slave trade, both as traders and as slave owners, has long been acknowledged by historians. But allegations in recent decades that Jews played a disproportionate role in the enslavement of African Americans, and that this fact has been covered up, have made the topic of a controversial one. Those who made this case include Louis Farrakhan, leader of the Nation of Islam, and David Duke, the former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard. A search for Jews and slave trade on YouTube pulls up more than 50,000 videos, most posted by the Nation of Islam, Duke, and their supporters. Mainstream scholars, for the most part, do not accept their conclusions and see the charges as essentially anti-Semitic. Did Jews really own slaves? And this is a great topic. This wasn't something that I really dove in or even thought to research about, even though I know, Kanye West made the allegations, and we have done a lot of, the research and reviews and stuff ourselves about slavery. This wasn't something that I thought to go further in, so I'm glad you pulled this up.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Jacob Rader Marcus, a historian and reform rabbi, wrote in his 4-volume History of Americans, Jews, that over 75% of Jewish families in Charleston, South Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, and Savannah, Georgia, owned slaves, and nearly 40% of Jewish households across the country did. The Jewish population in these cities were quite small. However, so the total number of slaves they owned represented just a small fraction of the total slave population. Eli Faber, I hope I'm saying his name right, Faber, a historian at New York City's John Jay College, reported that in 1790, Charleston's Jews owned a total of 93 slaves, and that perhaps six Jewish families lived in Savannah in 1771. Wow.
Wow.
That's low.
I know. 6.
A number of wealthy Jews were also involved in the slave trade in the Americas, some as ship owners who imported slaves and others as agents who resold them. In the United States, Isaac DaCosta of Charleston, David Franks of Philadelphia, and Aaron Lopez of Newport, Rhode Island, are among the early American Jews who were prominent in the importation and sale of African slaves. In addition, some Jews were involved in the trade in various European Caribbean colonies. Alexandre Lindo, a French-born Jew who became a wealthy merchant in Jamaica in the late 18th century, was a major seller of slaves on the island. Did Jews dominate the slave trade? Let's see. Not according to the scholars that have closely examined the question. Several studies of the Jewish role in the slave trade were conducted in the 1990s. Oh, wow. One of them, by John J. Faber, compared available data on Jewish slave ownership and trading activity in British territories in the 18th century to that of the wider population. Faber concludes that the claim of Jewish domination is false and that the Jewish role in slavery was exceedingly limited. That's very low. It's like a small portion.
Mm-hmm.
According to Faber, I hope I'm saying it right, guys, British Jews were always in the minority of investors in slaving operations and were not known to have been among the primary owners of slave fleets. Faber found that, with few exceptions, Jews were minor figures in brokering the sale of slaves upon their arrival in the Americas. And, given the urban dwelling propensity of most American Jews, few accumulated large rural properties and plantations where slave labor was most concentrated. According to Faber, Jews were more likely than non-Jews to own slaves, but on average they owned fewer of them. Other studies by Harold Brackman and Saul Friedman reached similar conclusions. In a 1994 article in the New York Review of Books, David Bryan Davis, an emeritus professor of history at Yale University and author of an award-winning trilogy of books about slavery, noted that Jews were one of the countless religious and ethnic groups around the world to participate in the slave trade. The participants in the Atlantic slave system included Arabs, Berbers, scores of African ethnic groups, Italians, Portuguese, Spaniards, Dutch, Jews, Germans, Swedes, French, English, Danes, white Americans, Native Americans, and even thousands of New World blacks who had been emancipated or were descended from freed slaves, but who then became slave-holding farmers or planters themselves.
That's crazy.
Wow.
You came from that, you said, I'm going to do it too. You came from that. Your folks came from that. And you said,
interesting.
That's crazy.
Especially the part, okay, wow. I want to say that I remember maybe hearing about that in one of the videos that we did, but it wasn't very many. Like, it wasn't very much information that I heard about that in those videos.
Right.
Davis went on to note that in the American South in 1830, there were 120 Jews among the 45,000 slaveholders, owning 20 or more slaves, and only 20 Jews among the 12,000 slaveholders owning 50 or more slaves. What's the origin of the Jewish domination claim? The claim of Jewish domination first came to wide attention with the Nation of Islam's 1991 book, The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, Volume 1. 2 other volumes would follow, addressing different aspects of Black-Jewish relations. The heavily footnoted and seemingly scholarly book, which lists no individual author and was self-published by the Nation of Islam, purports to present irrefutable evidence that Jews owned slaves disproportionately more than any other ethnic or religious group in New World history. Wow. What a claim.
Wow.
The book makes a point of basing its findings on Jewish sources, including Encyclopedia Judaica and multiple works by Marcus. Though it includes no data on non-Jewish slave owners and traders from which to establish whether the Jewish role was in fact disproportionate, it also routinely ignores claims from the Jewish sources it relies on that undermines its thesis. Marcus, for example, asserts that Jews were always on the periphery of the slave trade and that sales of all Jewish traders lumped together did not equal that of the one Gentile firm dominant in the business. An observation the secret relationship ignores. Nonetheless, the notion of Jewish domination of slaving was embraced by, among others, David Duke, who who has promoted it on Twitter and on his website. Oh, wow. And by the City College of New York professor Leonard Jeffries, whose 1991 speech echoing the claim of Jewish domination provoked a public controversy that led to his ouster as chair of the college's Black Studies Department. Wow.
Wow.
A federal judge later reinstated him. Tony Martin, a tenured professor of Africana Studies at Wesley College, drew criticism in 1993 for assigning the secret relationship between blacks and Jews in his courses. Soon after, Martin published a book entitled The Jewish Onslaught: Dispatches from the Wesley Battlefront. Although the book was condemned by Wesley's president and many of Martin's colleagues, Martin remained on the faculty until his retirement in 2007. Wow. So you really got to do something to be ousted as a professor, it seems like.
Yeah. Just in the education field, you really have to do something.
Go back down.
It when I scroll it goes the other way. Yeah, but just in the professional educational field, you have to do, period, as a staff or faculty, you really got to do something crazy to get your butt kicked out from the school.
Right.
Yeah.
More recently, Jackie Walker, a British activist and major supporter of Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn, drew criticism in 2016 for claiming in a Facebook post that Jews were the chief financiers of the African slave trade. Walker, who also made other public comments offensive to Jews, was briefly suspended from the party because of her claim, but remained unapologetic and was reinstated within a month. She was later suspended again for publicly bemoaning Jewish centrality in Holocaust commemorations. Is there any merit to the book's claim? Mainstream scholars have on the whole rejected it. In addition to the study by Faber cited above, refutations, I think I said that right, refutations have been published by Davis, the Yale professor mentioned above, and Ralph Austin, an emeritus professor of African history at the University of Chicago, Winthrop D. Jordan, a history professor at the University of California, Berkeley, who specialized in slavery, wrote that the book employed shoddy scholarly methods and cherry-picked information, ignoring evidence that modified or countered its preordained conclusion. Henry Louis Gates, director of the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard University, called the Nation of Islam's book one of the most sophisticated instances of hate literature yet compiled, and charged that it massively misrepresents the historical record. I know Henry Louis Gates. Wow, that's like big.
Yeah.
So
he's saying, nah, that's bull.
Exactly. No way. Is it anti-Semitic to make this claim? Mainstream scholars and Jewish leaders generally see this claim as anti-Semitic. The Anti-Defamation League, the largest Jewish defense organization on its website, includes the false claim that Jews controlled the Atlantic slave trade in its description of contemporary manifestations of anti-Semitism. As Yale's Davis noted in his 1994 article, the claim is similar to numerous other historical efforts to blame Jews for a host of problems and atrocities. Jews partly became of their remarkable success in a variety of hostile environments, have long been feared as the power behind otherwise inexplicable evils. For many centuries, they were the only non-Christian minority in nations dedicated to the Christianization and thus the salvation of the world, signifying an antithetical. Other individual Jews were homogenized. Did I say that right? Homogenized and, is that refined? Refined as a race responsible for crucifying the Savior, for resisting the dissemination of God's word, for manipulating kings and world markets, for drinking the blood of Christian children, and in modern times for spreading the evils of both capitalism and communistic revolution. I've never heard all this.
Me either.
According to Davis, much of the historical evidence that scholars have relied on to document Jewish involvement in the slave trade is self-anti-Semitic, biased by deliberate Spanish efforts to blame Jewish refugees for fostering Dutch commercial expansion at the expense of Spain. Given this long history of conspiratorial fantasy and collective scapegoating, a selective search for Jewish slave traders becomes inherently anti-Semitic unless one keeps in view the larger context and the very marginal place of Jews in the history of the overall system, he continued.
That's it.
Wow.
Jeez.
So, I mean, why go through all that effort, and not just state the real facts? Why even put all that information out there if it's not 100% accurate? Because when people read historical research and books, you're thinking that the source is giving you facts. That's why you're reading it, because it's historical and you want to know about historical information based off of whatever the topic is.
Yeah, I just think that the information was looked to be said, not really. When you're looking to blame for slavery, when you're looking to say, why is this community doing substantially better than our community? Oh, that's right, because they enslaved us. When actually, they weren't better off than we were. They went through their things, we went through our things, but the end result of both nationalities, I believe, was the ability to work together. The Jewish community worked together, whereas the black community would not. That's the biggest thing. Plus, I mean, they had a head start in us, but to be why the Nation of Islam and now these other black groups are saying this is because we feel like we're behind and we feel like they're to blame for it. Where there's a lot of people to blame for it. And we, as blacks, didn't want to truly work together as one to build our own systems, to be the head of this, and to be the foundation for this, to make the railroads or make this, or we don't have anything that we're just the dominant over.
And all of the videos that we've watched.
That sounded like I was all over the place. Mm-hmm. I was trying to get my thought together. I was trying to put it together.
Mm-mm. The videos that we watched, I don't remember a single person citing any Jewish person or community being involved in the Atlantic slave trade.
I don't.
I'm trying to remember. If so, it was a very small. I think I do remember hearing them being on the docks, but I honestly can't really say. So I was going to say I never heard that. That was like the first time.
And maybe that's the reason why, because I was thinking, sometimes.
That's why you have to fact check people. I know I've said that several times.
But also, when people have a lot of money, they can have stuff erased from history. That too. When you have a lot of bread, you can get stuff taken down. You can get removed.
True, but success leaves clues, so information is going to leave clues. That's how I feel.
Can't hide it like that.
If you have many resources and you have scholars from all across, all over the world that reports and talks about slavery, and yet you still don't hear this particular thing, but yet you got this one person that's saying this random thing, then that's going to make me want to say, okay, well, I ain't read all these research studies that I've read. I ain't never read that. So let me go and see what they're talking about, and let's dig the rabbit hole. That's how you really get the facts.
True.
Yeah, because, scholars they're going to have like research studies.
Yeah.
It may be a little different, but they're going to have some to corroborate. That's what makes it more strong, and that's what makes it more,
Corroborate.
Uh-huh.
Corroborate.
Look it up. COO. I was trying to figure out that word, but I was trying to write around the other day.
But I was saying, and so basically the conclusion is, after me looking at other sites too and seeing kind of the same exact thing, it's safe to say that the Jewish community weren't a massive part of slavery.
No.
They played their part. They played a small percentage of the overall. So I can
very little. He said exceedingly small. Exceedingly means like
very, very small.
Yeah, not very much.
Blacks enslaved. It's basically blacks that were descendants of enslaved more black people, then he's saying that community enslaved.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Crazy. All right, man. Like, comment, subscribe. Don't take a nosedive, but comment down what you got. Something.
Wait, and if you all have some more information that
Yes.
that's similar or any other any related to that, and you all want us to read about it and want to dive into the topic a little more, give us a link, share. You always do. We appreciate you guys for that too. So let us know.
Because you got them people that gonna be like, yeah, you're right, and you got them people like, what are these people talking? You're wrong. So if you are that person, back it up. Back it up. Don't just give me a goofy, whack comment. Back it up with information. Back it up with information.
But listen, people don't listen. They just take bits and pieces. They don't hear. People don't hear. Or they only hear, but they're not listening. Go listen to what the article says, or go pull the article and read it for yourself.
Yeah.
And then listen to what we say.
I'm going to drop the link. I'm going to drop the article on the description.
People don't listen.
All right. Like, comment, subscribe, and take a nose. I'll comment out in the section below if you want some more.
Love you guys.